You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Adam Andrzejewski. Andrzejewski. It's an easy name. He's running for governor of the state of Illinois. He's one of, well, there's several people who have announced in the Republican primary. There's Bill Brady. And I guess actually other than Bill Brady, is anybody else announced and still in the race?
It's Bill Brady and I. I was actually the first announced candidate to put my neck on the chopping block, Jeff.
Okay, so at this point it's Bill Brady and Adam Andrzejewski, right?
That's right. Very good.
Easy name to remember, and we don't know when the election will be. It's scheduled now to be in February of 2010, but even as we tape, which is on May 17th, the year 2010, we're hearing that it's one of the recommendations of the Pat Quinn Reform Commission was to move the date, I think, to June. People don't think it's likely because Speaker Mike Madigan doesn't seem to want to do it, but you never know. Maybe there's a deal in the works. We'll know probably by the end of May. That's probably when the legislative session will end. And if they don't change the date by then, they're unlikely to change it, right?
I doubt if they change the date. I'm looking forward to February 2nd to 2010 as the primary deadline for the voters to have a real choice on the ballot.
A bit about our guest. He's a bit unusual. He has not run for any elected office before, right?
That's true.
So he's starting right on the top for governor of the state of Illinois in the Republican primary. He has made a name for himself in business, started a business when he was about 27, got out of that business or sold out when he was about 37, sold his business to his brother, made apparently a fair amount of money. We'll be talking about that. Learned something about how business operates and how it's affected by taxes. We'll be talking about taxes and what Mr. Andrzejewski's view is about whether we should raise or cut taxes, what the deficit is in the state of Illinois, and how we might, I shouldn't say we, but how government, I guess if they're the ones to take care of it, the governor and his aides, whoever that would be, can handle that, what his ideas about fixing the deficit. Is education running as well as it should throughout the state of Illinois? We'll be talking about that, and what the possible cures would be if it isn't running as well as it is. What are the social issues? Those are often thought to be important, especially in the Republican primary. As we used to say, gays, guns, God, abortion. That's something like that. I think that was Howard Dean's line. So don't turn that dial. This is going to be an action-packed show, and we're going to start look, there's a saying in politics, the thing that determines elections is MOM. We're a little past Mother's Day. MOM, message, organization, and money. I don't find out if you agree with that, but let's take it from the bottom. Right now, if we look at you and people say, do you have a base? Do you have a constituency? If you don't have a Senate district, you haven't run statewide before, who knows you? So we'll come to your message, that's important. We'll come to your organization, but people might want to know, do you have the money? Because like cash on hand, what's your cash on hand right now for your campaign organization?
Well, there's a number of different questions in that, Jeff. So
I'll just start with that one, cash on hand.
Absolutely. I've raised $125,000. $100,000 roughly is my own funding.
Okay, so that takes us to the point. One of the things you've mentioned is you want to do transparency. You've promised to put your income tax returns on your website just
Right.
like some candidates do, some don't. Some people, when they get elected, make these public. Richard Daley, the mayor of Chicago, makes his returns public. Todd Stroger, Cook County Board President, not so much. So there's a difference. You said you'd make it available first on April 15th. If you go to the website, which is adamforillinois.com, you find you're now saying you filed for an extension on the 15th, so it's now scheduled to be placed on the website on June 17th. But tell us this. You don't have to tell us your whole return orally. We'll wait till June 17th. What's your net worth? That's a nice figure. We can get a number right there.
Absolutely. I'm going to answer that question. Slight caveat ahead of that question is that 2.5 years ago, I sold the shares in the company that my brother and I had started, and I am under a non-disclosure agreement on that sale of my shares. However, since my wife brought a net worth to our marriage, I will give you an answer to your question. I think it's important, and I have a net worth in the low 8 figures.
Net worth in the low 8 figures. So you mean your total, is this net worth of your wife's and yours combined? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. My family, my wife Carrie and I have a net worth in the low 8 figures.
And put that in terms for people who don't speak in terms of figures. What's the range? Give them a number.
Well, in the low 8 figures means $10 million and up.
So 10 million to 99 million. Your net worth is somewhere between 10 million and 99 million.
Well, that's true.
You're saying in the low, so you're saying it's closer to 10 than to 99.
Right.
So somewhere like in the 10 to 20 million range. Does that be right?
That's right.
Okay. Want to get any closer? 10 to 15 maybe? Something like that?
You're good, Jeff. You're good.
All right. You know, I say, so people say as a rule of thumb, politicians will never spend more than about 1/6 of their net worth on their own campaigns. Do we have that right? Are you looking at that and saying, hypothetically, if we split the baby and your net worth is about 15 million, you didn't say that, I'm just saying estimating. Does that mean at most you would spend about, maybe $2.5 million on your own campaign?
Well, I'm concerned about the state of Illinois. I have 3 girls. I'm concerned about the political process here in Illinois. So I have a lot of latitude on this, and I can spend and make an investment into my campaign to reform Illinois, and as the campaign unfolds, I'll make those decisions.
So you can make an investment, but you're not saying what's the most you'll spend.
But I come from the business world, Jeff, and those type of things are actually competitive secrets. And when the lay of the land, when nobody can actually decide to run for the office, I made that decision. I was first out of the blocks on the Republican side. I understand the problems of Illinois, and I have solutions to those problems. So as the campaign firms up, so when people finally start making decisions, I'll also start making those hardcore financial decisions. And quite frankly, off my website at mytransparency at adam4illinois.com, we have a direct link to my D2s. So if anyone wants to know how much money I'm putting into the campaign, and I've already put in my first $100,000, we'll have a link directly to the State Board of Elections website where they can see that in real time.
Okay, so as of May 17th, when we're taping, and the legislative session is scheduled to end at the end of May, and as you know, if it goes over, to get an approval of the budget, it wouldn't require 50%, it would require 60%. Gives the Republicans a little bit more influence. So it's likely the Democrats won't want to do that, even though under Rod Blagojevich they did in the past.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, in the Illinois House, we're 1 seat shy of being in the superminority, so we hardly have a voice. And in the Senate, we are in the superminority. We control none of the statewide offices. So,
well, what is that? What's the number in the Senate between Democrats and Republicans?
I think we have 27 Republican senators.
27, and how many Democrats?
Jeff, I know that we have as few Republican senators than at any time in the last 150 years, and it takes you back to Abraham Lincoln.
How many senators do the Democrats have? If you said Republicans got 27, how many Republican senators? Excuse me, the Republicans have 27. How many Democratic senators are there in the Illinois Senate?
I've written 15,000 words of simple, clear, and robust public policy. And I would actually like to talk about that policy. I don't know how many.
So you don't know how many senators there are?
Right.
Okay, because it is 37 Democrats and 22 Republicans.
Okay.
State Senate's got 59. In the State House, how many Republicans do they have there in the State House? Do you know?
I don't know.
See, well, the reason why I'm making this point, not to show I know something and you don't because I'm not running, but my job is to challenge you and see the broad landscape and what you know about that. Because the viewers out there, they want to know that.
Sure.
So it's 71 to 48. I should add up to, actually 70 to 48. I almost got it wrong. Sure. 70 Democrats in the State House.
This is the political establishment here in Illinois. I understand the results of what they've put the situation that they have put Illinois in. We're number 1 in the country in pension debt. We're number 2 in the country in state debt at $114 billion of state debt. We're 3rd in gambling revenues, and they want to raise revenue by expanding gambling. In the last 10 years, 569 of our public officials have gone to jail. 1/3 of our 8th graders are not proficient in reading. These are the harms of Illinois.
Yeah, but 2 things on that. 70 Democrats, 48 Republicans in the State House, 37 Democrats in the State Senate, 22 Republicans. That's what you have to work with. So if you did get to be governor, you would face substantial majorities. And if the question is, can you really bring about change with those Democratic majorities? Because you could propose, but these folks are going to dispose of what you do.
If I am elected governor, and it's one of the reasons, I know the first 2 calls
are
to...
But it's not going to change. If you're elected governor...
The way I'm running is a direct strategy. The way I'm running is a direct strategy to challenge the political establishment and the status quo. For instance, I wrote 15,000 words, like we talked about, of solutions on issues that have not been tackled for a generation. So if I'm elected, I have a mandate from the people of Illinois to go to Springfield and to get things done.
Okay, so right now, as of May 17th, we've got a deficit. I think it's estimated at $4 billion for this current fiscal year, 09.
Right.
Do you agree with that number?
That's the number that's been floated. Now, you and I both have seen over the course of the last 6 to 7 months, as that number went, in total from $4 billion to $12 billion, and how they used 2 fiscal years together to get there.
But it didn't.
Actually, it did.
If you add those 2 years, if you add the next fiscal year of $8 billion and this fiscal year of $4 billion, that's how people get $12 billion. I agree. Sometimes politicians don't say $12 billion refers to 2 years.
But that addition started at a total of $4 billion
for this fiscal year, and most people agree that's the case. Do you dispute that? Do you dispute that 09 there's a deficit of $4 billion prior to any stimulus funds coming in from the feds?
Both sides of the aisle seem to agree on the $4 billion and the $8 billion. Now, I question the numbers, and this is why. I've been able to identify that the state of Illinois, the General Assembly, doesn't even know how many checkbooks that we cut checks out of. They say slightly more than 600. If you look at Danny Hines' website on the comptroller's website, he says that we cut checks, fund accounts, out of slightly less than 700. If we don't know the number of checkbooks, how do we ever have any better financial data? And that's why, as a foundation, Jeff, of my campaign, it's every dime, online, in real time. We need to be able to see the financial data, and if we can see it, we can fix it without raising taxes.
But assuming that's right, most of the Republicans and Democrats say a $4 billion deficit. Assuming with your caveats that that's correct, and assuming, as we've been told, that the feds are providing $2 billion for this year to the state of Illinois, so that cuts the deficit down to $2 billion. In 45 days or so, what would you do if you were governor to remove, I know this, not the various programs you say, and the dispute, and every dime online, but in 45 days, if you were governor instead of Pat Quinn, and if you had the majority that exists now, 37 Democrats had 22 Republicans in the Senate, 70 representatives, Democratic reps, and 40 Republicans. What would you do and be able to get past the legislature to handle that $2 billion remaining deficit for this fiscal year, of which there are 45 days left?
Right. Basically, the state budget, we look good on paper in terms of the state of the number of state employees versus the population of Illinois. We're a grant-making budget, so every single grant that doesn't have a metric to it, that you can't measure results, that's unaccountable, I would cut that grant, and we'd be able to cut approximately $2 billion on that basis.
By cutting grants?
It's a grant-making budget. So what Rod Blagojevich did
can you
is
tell
he
us
cut
what-
back the number of employees of state government, and he ramped up the number of grants. For instance, over the course of the last 10 years, Illinois has grown in terms of population by 4%. Meanwhile, the state budget has exploded by 48%. And so there's a lot of
Give me an
areas.
example of grants that you would cut. What does that mean?
Sure. First example that comes to mind is the $1 million that went to the church or the school, and then went back to the school or the church in Chicago. Got sent to the wrong place. Second example is there are quasi units of government out there that get state money, and there's absolutely no accountability and no results that are measured that come out of these
Give me
things.
another example, because even if it's all, what did you say, $1 million? What was the church? The grant that you just referred to, how much was that for?
That was $1 million,
$1
right.
So you need
Right.
1,000.
This is how I want to walk you
You
through
need
the process.
1,000 of those examples to get to
Sure,
$1 billion.
sure.
For another billion, you need another 1,000. So we need 2,000
Okay.
of those church examples.
Right. I
Do I
wanna
have that?
walk you
Is my
through
math
the-
right? You check my math. Is that math right?
I didn't listen to that, but this,
2,000
I want
times
to walk you through the
2,000 times
process
$1 million.
of how
Would
I
that
get there.
would that be $2 billion?
If we have open books, finally, open, honest,
Okay.
open books, we send teams of forensic accountants. And the Kansas governor was able to save $1 billion for the small state of Kansas through a forensic audit. If I'm governor, on those open books, I just send those accountants in there, and we save a lot of money. We're a bigger state than Kansas. For instance,
so they saved how much? $1 billion? So you think you could save $2 billion there? Is that your point?
well, the last time that Americans for Prosperity did the Piglet book, they were able to identify nearly $2 billion worth of out-and-out.
Did they do it? Isn't that book put out now by the Illinois Policy Institute?
It is, but 3 years
They
ago,
took it over from Americans for Prosperity?
Americans for Prosperity did a Piglet book, and they were able to cut nearly $2 billion
it's been
of
down
just
now.
out-and-out wasteful spending here in Springfield.
But isn't the one that the Illinois Policy Institute just did last year, I think they came up with $700 million. So I guess we're getting close, because first it was $2 billion, now it's about $700 million. Others is going down.
Well, different people look at it different ways. I'm referencing 3 years ago, I'm referencing a concrete program of forensic accounting. Look, the city of New Orleans just put in forensic accounting. And for a city in Louisiana, they identified 140 off-the-books agencies in New Orleans, only one of which had a salary of $37,000. We need to bring open books, forensic accounting, and then we need to bring ethics policy, my ethics policy, to Springfield. And that is to post the sources of income for elected officials.
Okay, so you think post the sources of income, so everybody's going to place their income tax returns if they're a corporation or a small corporation, small business, they'll place those returns. If they're an individual, they'll place those returns. That's what you're saying, right?
For
every state
elected
rep,
officials.
every state rep,
Right.
every state senator, every statewide officer. Anybody else? Are we going further?
Yeah,
Would
absolutely.
it
Every
compel
single
county?
elected official in Illinois needs
Whether it's
to post their
county, state.
personal sources of income. It's a
Okay.
policy that Governor Bobby Jindal did in Louisiana.
Include
And it-
school board members too?
Sure,
So even people
absolutely.
who aren't paid to be on the school board, they're
Right.
volunteers? Do you think that's going to cut down on the number of people who are going to want to serve? Because if they're on the school board and they're not paying, they're donating 100, 200 hours of their time a year, and now they're supposed to give up their privacy?
Actually, Illinois is in crisis. As taxpayers, we deserve it. Not school boards, and obviously
Well,
that's an area of
they're elected.
expertise for me. Many school districts are over $100 million. Nearly every school district in every locale, and we have nearly 900 school districts, would be the biggest company within that locale or that hometown. So even though they're not paid, that doesn't have anything to do with the ethics policy, which would require people to post their sources of income.
Do you think
As
those people
taxpayers,
are-
we deserve that
So
transparency.
you say, just take an example like Winnetka area we show, or Hinsdale where you live.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a school board there. I know there's a school board in Winnetka, right? School board
Sure.
for Hinsdale, right?
Right.
I don't know what the budget is for
Two
Hinsdale.
school boards for Hinsdale and approximately.
K through 8 in Winnetka is about $30 million, I think, for the new Cheer district, which is broader, covers 6 feeder schools, probably about $80 or $90 million. All of those people who are on those boards are volunteers. They're not being paid. So you expect, do you think, I mean, they're spending a fair amount of money, and I guess you would say possibly they could be doing it more efficiently. They might cut and spend less, right? But do you think putting their incomes up there is going to help in cutting down that spending?
I don't know if it's going to help cut spending on the school. What it will help do is to make sure that we've got good, clean, and honest people that are elected to office. And if you're not willing to disclose your personal sources of income, because there may be a conflict or something else, then I submit to you that you shouldn't be running for office.
But in addition to income, they ought to be disclosing net worth. Probably even more importantly than their income is what is their wealth when they entered that position, right?
I'm not so concerned about net worth. I answered your question because I'm the transparency candidate. I think I need to answer that question. But for regular people, I don't
You didn't give me your exact number. You're not going to file your balance sheet, so to speak.
Right. I don't think that net worth is so important for people to pry that deeply.
See, some people say when you come to office, you get a certain net worth, and then they ask that question each year, and then if after 10 years holding public office, no other private jobs, your net worth is going up dramatically, perhaps we could infer something's going on.
Well, I don't think that follows at all. You could have a good investment year or a bad investment year. My net worth went down last year because the investments were bad. I mean, I had planned for it. I didn't lose as much as other people, but I don't think net worth, it's in real time what your personal sources of income is. It worked in Louisiana, and it will work in Illinois. And as governor, I will bring that reform to Springfield. And I'm probably the only candidate that would do that.
All right. So getting back to the deficit, and we'll come back to reform in a second. The next year, 2010, as you know, most of the Democrats and Republicans, the establishment, seem to agree that the estimated deficit is about $8 billion.
Right.
So if you were governor, how would you cut, number one, well, you might say you want to get in there and look to determine if it's really $8 billion.
Sure,
absolutely. But assuming it is $8 billion,
right.
How would you cut? What would you do? Would you not raise taxes? Would you cut? Where would you cut to handle that $8 billion deficit?
Sure. 3-point plan. First point, every dime online in real time. So we can see it, we can fix it. And this is why it's so important. Not only do we not know the number of checkbooks within the state government, we don't know the number of programs. The auditor, William Holland, was asked by the General Assembly to come up with a list among the 83 state agencies. He identified 1,750. He said that wasn't an accurate number. So if we don't know the programs, if we don't have the checkbooks, we don't have accurate information. You can't
answer that question, is what you're telling me.
No, I can answer it. Now, on those open books, we come in with forensic accountants. So let's just say we're only as good as Kansas, and we get $1 billion out of that. And let's say from the outside, Americans for Prosperity were right, and that there's another $2 billion worth of just out-and-out waste fraud.
Again, because didn't we get the $2 billion in 2009? If we got it in 2009, we can go back and get another $2 billion each year?
Well, doesn't each fiscal year, isn't that a separate year?
Yeah, but the $8 billion or so, it's been out of the budget now, presumably, if you took it out in 2009.
So we're dealing with a $4 billion deficit?
No, we're still dealing with an $8 billion deficit, presumably that doesn't reflect the $2 billion in pork that you took out. Okay.
So it's 6?
Is that what you're saying? It is? Because you're saying it automatically comes down. So you're saying the $8 billion deficit is incorrect, is your point? Because once you take out the pork from 2009, it'll be 6. That's your point? Am I getting that right? Once you take out the $2 billion of pork you found in 2009,
then the
deficit will be $6 billion.
Sure.
Okay. So now you're left with a $6 billion deficit. What do you do to get that down?
Right. Well, the Senate caucus will say that there's $2 to $3 billion to save on managing our Medicaid and Medicare systems more effectively.
Matt Murphy, one of your potential competitors, has been the spokesperson on that issue. He's been dealing with that.
Bill Brady also trotted it out. So let's just say,
so
if we can do that,
so at most you're down to
that's good. So now we're down to say $3 billion. And if you have the economy come back, if this deficit exploded in the economic recession when it was at its worst. So as the economy comes back, that deficit's also going to shrink in real time. So trying to make decisions out literally 14 months on that number that's exploded over the course of the last 4 to 5 months from the outside without good information, I think it just makes the point of why every dime online is so important. We need to be able to see the financial information of the state.
We're going to go back to the lightning round because we don't have too much time left. Let's go over to education. I heard you say it's pretty good once you take out Chicago, but here you said there's more you can do. On general, on average, throughout the state of Illinois, education doing well or not?
I think in education we do well. If you take out Chicago, we nearly lead Illinois. We nearly lead as Illinois nearly leads the other 50 states in terms of graduation rate. If you add Chicago back in, we fall to 13th. So we do need to do something about the failing schools of Chicago. This is what I'll do. I will bust the charter school cap. 10,000 kids are waitlisted for a good public school called a charter school. I will eliminate that cap.
As many
at the
charter
legislature.
schools as they want, they can have.
Absolutely.
By district.
Second thing that I'll do, and it's innovative. The Springfield monies comprise 35% of that Chicago school budget. I will in every single Chicago school, the Springfield portion I will deliver to the school rather than to the bureaucracy.
Would you go further?
If Chicago
Would you go
residents
further
want bureaucracy, they can fund
Adam,
the
we're
bureaucracy.
running out of time, so we've got to keep this short. But would you go further? Would you give the money directly to the individual school voucher, school choice? Would you like to do that, especially for schools that are failing, that are not doing well? If we're spending $14,000 on a kid,
I would like
state, federal,
to
local,
bring school vouchers to Illinois.
You
I
would.
think the
Okay,
political
you favor
reality in Springfield doesn't reflect that right now.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Adam Andrzejewski.
That's right.
And you're running for
Thank
governor in the Republican primary. We got a few minutes, so let's go quickly onto the social issues. You're pro-life?
I'm pro-life.
Does that mean abortion should be completely illegal? The Supreme
As
Court
governor,
says,
there's nothing that you can do with the Supreme Court decision.
What if you
What
can?
you can
If the
do is
Supreme Court
parental
changed-
notification, consent, and public financing of abortion, and those are 70% issues, Jeff, with the American public.
But if the Supreme Court changed and it did overturn Roe v. Wade and allowed the state legislature to ban abortion, if all of those things happened,
I would be in favor of the constitutional amendment, yes.
you would say you would ban abortion completely, no exceptions except for the life of the mother?
Yes, I believe in the purpose and uniqueness of every single human life.
Guns, would you bring back a state ban on assault weapons? Not bring back, there was a federal ban, it's been gone. Some people say the state should institute an assault weapon ban.
I am not for further regulation or expansion of gun regulation.
Okay, you're happy with the way it is right now?
I am. I spent 10 years in the city of Chicago. I understand the right of self-defense. And if I'm going to make an error on policy, I'm going to make that error so people have a good way to even out an unequal power relationship.
You're opposed to same-sex marriage?
I am.
Opposed to civil unions?
I am.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of moving the definitions or moving the lines of society on those issues.
On ethics, would you institute caps? You know, it's been proposed that the federal caps on contributions be extended to the state level. So right now there are no caps. Individuals, they want to give money to people like you, they could give up to $2,400 per election cycle. Would you favor that? Some say there should be a $10,000 cap. Would you favor any cap?
Caps come at the problem from the wrong side of the equation. The problem with Illinois politics is the power invested in our elected leaders cloaked in privacy, where they get to negotiate, for instance, the budget of Illinois with no public scrutiny until the bill hits, and then we have 24 hours to look at it. It's that type of power that we need to go at. If you cap contributions, a guy like me running from the outside, where like Lisa Madigan has $3.5 million in her campaign fund, that $3.5 million is worth so much more money if you cap donations.
Because you got to
right
get
now.
it. You got to go
Absolutely,
out and
it's
get
an
very small
incumbent
chunks.
protection plan.
Okay. Term limits. Do you favor term limits for individuals?
I never used to be in favor of term limits.
What about now?
Over the course of the last 2 years, I've switched around on that. I think the only way to end the hammerlock of power in Springfield and oftentimes locally is through term limits. Even if we put a sunset provision of like 10 years on that, I would be in favor of term limits.
Term limits for the legislative leaders, Democrat and Republican, 10 years. That's been one proposal. Would you favor that? House Republican leader, the Speaker, the Senate President, all those folks.
I think
can only
that'd be a
there
good
for 10
first
years.
step. I think that would be a good first
State
step.
reps, what would you have? 6-year term limits?
2 terms.
2 terms each. So
Absolutely.
same thing for governor.
We need
Same
the
thing-
establishment
same thing for
to be
governor?
able to move. Yes, absolutely. They need to change seats at the very minimum.
So you think you can win this race? You
That's
think you
right.
can beat Bill Brady, who's been a state senator and has run
That's right.
statewide? You think you can beat Joe
They have a
Burkett?
tough case to make. They've been there for a long time, and they have to justify their time.
Litmus
in
test.
Illinois.